Welcome to Illuminati Silver. We tell the truth about silver. Today is Monday the 19th of August 2019 and we have the great privilege to interview today Paul Thorpe, watch dealer. Existing subscribers are aware that our channel is primarily dedicated to those interested in precious metals and with a particular emphasis on gold and silver. We are also almost pioneers in that now almost everyone is copying us in talking about the other important issues that affect their price outside of normal supply and demand considerations, such as international trade, banking, economics, fiscal policy and politics. We have, however, been asked on a number of occasions to also discuss, especially on our website and within our inner sanctum, other investment areas, as a number of our members already hold equities, property and precious metal portfolios. Well, one area we're interested in, and have been since our teenage years, and now has grabbed the public imagination in the past couple of years, is that of watches, and especially the luxury brands. Now, to perhaps scratch that itch, and to share this interest with you, we have the pleasure of introducing today expert watch dealer and prolific YouTuber, especially in the past couple of months, Paul Thorpe, whose channel is called Paul Thorpe, Watch Dealer. And we provide a link to his channel in the description box below. Now here is the interview. Paul, hello and welcome to Illuminati Silver.
Hi Richard, it's a pleasure to be here.
Now Paul, what we propose to do is to ask you around 10 questions about luxury watches and the industry as a whole. And this will form the basis of this YouTube video. And then to ask you 8 specific investment questions exclusively for our Inner Sanctum members. But first, Paul, can you tell us a little about yourself, your YouTube channel, and why over the past couple of months you've become one of the most productive YouTubers in this space?
Well, great question to kick off with. So my name is Paul Thorpe. I'm now a retired watch dealer. I first started sort of becoming involved and around the watch business way back in 1975 when I was just 14 years old. My mum and dad, bless them, were in business themselves. And introduced me to retail, basically.
Right.
Watches have always played a major role in my life, and they've always been an important part to me. So I think that's certainly how I got started in the business. And I recently, about a year ago, I decided to retire. I actually started YouTube in 2016, Richard, and did it for a couple of months, very successful, very fast-growing channel in a very short space of time, but I was still active as a dealer. My profession was selling watches, and YouTube, as you all know, can consume your life if you're not careful, and it can quickly become a full-time job. So I packed up after a couple of months, said goodbye to the YouTube world, and a lot of people were sad to see me go. So after I retired, the shackles are off to a large degree. I got a bit bored, to be honest, having nothing to do all day, so I thought I'll come back to YouTube, I'll give it another try, and the rest, as they say, is history. The channel is growing beyond my wildest expectations, to be fair.
I have to admit, we're quite jealous of your channel because it is growing at a much faster rate than we've ever grown. So all credit to you. You mentioned that your father was a watch dealer. So this is how you got into the business, I assume, then, basically. And normally, my father was a coal miner. So I didn't want to follow his profession. So what made you follow your father's profession?
Well, he was actually, do you know what? My dad was actually by profession. He was an engineer. He actually was quite proud that he made all I can call them his parts. He made parts that went onto the Apollo spaceships back in the 1960s. So he was a very good engineer. But as you'll find with a lot of engineers, because they like so much precision and they're used to precision, they often appreciate watches as well. And my dad, so I wouldn't have called my dad a watch dealer back then. He was more a watch enthusiast who had a keen eye to be able to buy a watch, keep it, wear it and enjoy it, and then sell it for a profit. And that's where I very quickly picked up on, and I thought, hey, you know, this is a great idea. You can buy something that's really super lovely to own, super nice to wear, and then one day you get to sell it and make a profit. What can be better? So that's where it started and how it started.
You say you're no longer a watch dealer. Well, is it a profession you would recommend to others today?
What a great question. Yes and no, because whenever I speak to my wife, and Richard, this is a question I always enjoy answering because I think it's a good answer. It's the best thing I ever did in my life, and it's also the worst thing that I ever did in my life. Plenty of highs and lows in the life of a watch dealer. People that watch my videos on a regular basis will see that I've had my difficulties and, you know, my problems with robbery, etc. But at the same time, look, you know, no excuses. Being a full-time professional and a good watch dealer has its financial benefits and pretty good ones as well. So the answer is it's a bittersweet industry. Would I recommend someone getting it today if they was the right mindset and they had the wherewithal? Yes, definitely. I think it's easier to be, these days in 2019, I would say it's easier to be a collector than a dealer.
Right. Well, I've watched not all, but quite a few of your videos. And the one thing that confuses me is which watch to buy within a certain budget. Now, if not everyone is in the fortunate circumstance that they could buy a whole portfolio of watches. So if you could only own 2 watches, say one for everyday use and one for special occasions, which 2 would you buy and why?
Well, that would vastly depend on the budget. Can you give me a budget?
Okay, let's say under £500 for the everyday watch, and let's say up to, I don't know, up to £10,000 maximum, perhaps up to £5,000, because I think when you exceed 5,000, it's becoming very pricey for most people. So, below 500, up to 5,000.
Okay, fairly simple questions to answer. I think without trying to be smart, I think under £500, Richard, I don't really think it matters.
Right.
Because at that level, you're buying a watch with your heart rather than your head. And I often speak about buying watches either from your heart, from your head, or with a combination of both. You know, with all due respect to any watches under the £500 mark, they're never going to be investments. They're always going to lose money to walk out your door of them. So my advice to someone would be to take their time, have a good look round, see what they fancy, and buy that watch with your heart rather than your head. And enjoy it, love it, wear it, enjoy it. I don't look down on watches under £500. I was brought up on watches that would have cost, in today's equivalent, maybe less than £500. My first watch was a Timex, and today I still have an emotional attachment, even though I don't have the watch, sadly. I have an emotional attachment to that brand and that particular watch. So I think under 500, it doesn't really matter a great deal. Up to 5,000, I would definitely recommend getting into the Rolex brand. There is no substitute for that brand. It's not going to be easy in today's market. But if you take your time, watch plenty of my videos and watch the sort of watches that I'm recommending, you can turn that £5,000 into a profit, and quite a significant one as well.
And at £5,000, it's going to be a used watch, isn't it? If it's
absolutely, yeah. You're looking at the sort of the Datejust range, possibly. If you can get up to maybe spend a little bit more, get to an Explorer 2. The thing is I look at watch buying the same as I look at house buying. I don't think I've ever bought a house that I could afford. Whenever I've looked at my houses, I've always started off at one price, ended up somewhere else, looked at the budget, looked at my mortgage and thought, what am I doing? And then 2 years down the line, I think, you know what, I'm coping with this quite admirably. I'm pleased that I did it.
Well, I've done the same with houses, Paul. I've just moved from a reasonably large 5-bedroom detached to a 4-story apartment. And at my time of life, do not ask me why I've moved to a 4-story apartment. I have no idea. I really
The stair lift comes in.
I'll need one soon. Okay. One area that's gaining a lot of interest, and that is fake watches. They're becoming far more commonplace. And as you've stated in a number of your videos, their quality is improving as time goes on.
Yeah.
What safeguards or actions should someone take if they're looking to purchase a premium watch in the second-hand market, whether it be via an authorized reseller or eBay or another online site, for example?
Okay. Well, I think, first of all, it's not a marketplace for the uninitiated. It's a dangerous game. That's the bottom line. But my advice is always is that when you find yourself in that position, what you're doing, Richard, you need to invest in the person that you're buying it from, rather than the watch. So my advice to people is always, look, forget the watch for the moment. What about the person? Do you trust this person? Does he come with a good reputation? Are you comfortable with this individual's explanation about where the watch has come from, its provenance, etc., etc.? Now, I hear a lot of horror stories in the watch business quite naturally, and some of them come from places like eBay that you've just mentioned. And when the full story unravels, I'm afraid I have to say to the person that's been called, well, it's your own goddamn fault. Because, you know, they've gone onto eBay, they've not looked at the person's feedback, they've not looked at their seller history, they've not looked at what they've been selling in the past. So, as an example, look, if someone is selling second-hand T-shirts and his old socks and his old trainers for 5 years, and then all of a sudden a 10 grand Rolex appears on his listings, look, it may be genuine, but for me, it raises a flag. So I think my advice is, excuse me, is not to get involved in trying to tell if the watch is genuine yourself. That's a job for an expert. Your initial job is to do your research, take your time, and invest in your seller, and that is vital.
Just to continue that just a little bit, and this is probably an unfair question, but without having a real watch in front of you, what are the sort of telltale signs of a fake? I mean, I appreciate it's going to vary by brand and so forth, but are there some very clear telltale signs that a particular premium watch is a fake?
Well, it depends on what level the fakes are at. I mean, if you go to, you know, if you're in Turkey and you buy one from one of the guys that has got them all hanging over his wrist on the beach, yes, there are some significant telltale signs. I mean, some of those watches won't even have a sweeping mechanism, so we know that a Rolex sweeps rather than ticks, even though that's confusing as well, because if you look very closely at a Rolex watch's sweeping movement, it's actually not faultless. There is a slight delay to it, but a tick is a proper tick tock. There's a definite break. It's not a job for the uninitiated. It's not a job for the beginner. So the answer is that in 2019, with the quality of the fakes that are coming onto the market, I would have to say there are no real obvious standout points. It's an accumulation of 2 or 3 things that just aren't right. Now, for me personally, I use my fingers as much as my eyes. I've been dealing these watches for so long. If you give me a fake watch, I can pretty much tell you it's not right with my eyes closed. And that's because of the feel, even down to the sound of these things. But what you'll notice is, Richard, is perhaps quite a little bit strange, is that I like to give a lot of information on my videos. And one of the videos that you won't see me make is how to spot a fake Rolex. And the reason that you won't see me make that video, and I've seen hundreds of them, there are hundreds of them, none of them are safely accurate. Now, they might give you a little tip here and a little pointer here, but everything changes in the fake world. And if I was to make a video that purports to tell people how to tell the difference between a real watch and a fake one, I'm afraid all it would do is lead people into more trouble than they're already in. So my answer to that question, I'm sorry it's a little bit long-winded, but my answer to that question is usually, look, I can't put 20, 30, 40 years of lifetime experience into an hour's video. It's just impossible.
Right.
I wouldn't want my heart, God forbid I ever needed a heart surgeon. I wouldn't want a heart surgeon that had been taught his trade in an hour on a video on YouTube.
Now, that's a very fair comment. You mentioned eBay and the danger of using eBay. And I've had some friends of mine who've said, but if you have the box and papers, then you're okay. Now, I think your answer to that, but because I've seen a video on that very subject with you. But for the benefit of our listeners, do they guarantee it's a real watch? Box and papers?
No, absolutely not. The box and papers, to a large degree, as far as authenticity is concerned, can be absolutely worthless. Right. As you said, you've seen a video. I mean, you can walk into a Rolex, an authorised Rolex dealers, buy a brand new watch at 5 o'clock, lose the box and papers on the train at 5:30. Is it any less authentic? No, absolutely not. It's still an authentic Rolex. At the same time, there are thousands of fake warranty cards out there in the right or wrong market, whichever way you want to put it. There are places that you can go on the internet and buy, I don't know, a dozen fake warranty cards for whatever they cost. They're not expensive, I wouldn't imagine. So no, they are a nice addition. They kind of make up a complete set, if you like. And there is, to some degree, especially on the older watches with the old punch style papers, they do give you a little bit more comfort, particularly if you've got to check that the paperwork actually matches the serial number of the watch, etc. I'm actually more of a lover of the old style punch papers than the new style warranty cards, because I think they were harder to forge.
One of your latest videos is entitled "Watch Crime in the UK and Why It's Completely Out of Hand." Could you, obviously we want people to watch that video, but could you just give us a very brief summary of what you're referring to? And are other countries, because most of our listeners are from the United States, equally as susceptible to the problems encountered in the UK?
Well, Richard, again, thank you for such a great question, because these are subjects that are very close to my heart. And I'm afraid crime in general in the UK is, in my opinion, is completely out of hand. Now, if you're one of those people out there that are fortunate enough not to have been a victim of crime, you might not necessarily agree with what I'm saying. Having said that, I've been a victim of crime on numerous occasions, some very serious crime, and I see what goes on behind the scenes. Now, we have a number of issues in the United Kingdom, and this is very interesting that you say that most of, or a lot of your viewers in the United States, that without becoming political in the terms of firearms, etc., in the US they have, obviously a right to defend their lives and their properties, castle laws that we just don't have in the UK. And rightly or wrongly, that's the way it is. And the criminals in the UK, we go back to this old one, the only people in the UK with guns are the bad guys and the weapons. And this causes a problem because honest, decent people like myself, not only we have to be wary of who's coming our way, we also are aware that we are not legally allowed to defend ourselves. And the self-defense laws in the UK are more than a grey area. It's hideous. I mean, I could almost become a lawyer when it comes to self-defense laws in the United Kingdom, because I've been arrested for defending myself in the past, and only the charges were only dropped praise to the Crown Prosecution Service, who understood the full story, rather than the police, who were frankly quite happy to go ahead with any prosecution as long as they got one.
Right. That's very fair. And you mentioned it's a grey area. It's a wonderful lead to my next question, because I would like to ask you about the grey watch market. What is it? And should people use it? And if so, when?
Okay. Well, absolutely. And again, it's a subject that's close to my heart. So, I mean, look, in years gone by, people could have necessarily classed me as a grey dealer. I would resent that, and I would refute that. And I think the reason why is because grey is closing in on being black market, and there's nothing black market about what I did as a watch dealer. The real grey market, I class real grey market dealers is, let's just say yourself, let's say you've been on the waiting list for a Rolex Daytona, say, for the last 5 years, and you got a call today from your local authorised dealer to say, Richard, at last your Daytona has arrived. If you come into the store, it's going to cost you, list is £9,550. You go in there at 1 o'clock, you walk out of that door, you walk down the road to the local independent, and you sell that watch to him for 15,000.
Wow.
Now you've just made £5,500 on a watch that you never intended to keep. You only bought it to make a large profit. That makes you, to me, a flipper, a grey market dealer, whichever you want to call it. Now, the guy that's bought the watch from you has paid very, very good, strong money for that watch. In fact, he's only going to make £1,000, or, £15,000 was a low estimate to sell, but I'm just using figures for an example. He's going to make a lot less. There's nothing great about what he's doing. In fact, the authorised dealers, if you talk to them privately, and some of even the major watch manufacturers, no names, no pack drill, but they will admit to you that they need the grey market, or the so-called grey market, to keep their brand afloat, because there are a lot of watch brands out there. Rolex isn't one of them, but there are a lot of watch brands out there who basically need to get rid of stock. And the only way that they can do that is to pass on the excess stock to so-called grey market dealers at huge discounts, and it keeps the cogs of the watch world working.
One of the reasons I believe people are able to flip these watches is because watch waiting lists are so long in certain brands. Would you say they were deliberately contrived by the manufacturers? Because I cannot believe that the likes of Rolex cannot produce enough watches if the demand is there. And yet we know there are huge waiting lists for them.
Of course. I mean, absolutely. There's no question that it's all totally planned and contrived. There's no shadow of a doubt. If Rolex wanted to make 5,000 Rolex BLNRs or Daytonas or Blue Dial Sky Dwellers, they could do it in a day or two. The lack of watches available is definitely a strangulation that starts right at the very top and works its way down. To be fair, I don't think a lot of the authorised dealers know themselves. Nobody really knows the inner workings of Rolex, not even their own authorised dealers. That kind of information is privy to a very, very few people in some very high selected places. But unquestionably, the waiting list and the lack of availability, in my opinion, is deliberate.
One of the costs luxury watch buyers underestimate is that of servicing. Now, broadly speaking, how often should a premium watch be serviced? And what sort of figures can the costs range from? Obviously, give a particular brand if you're familiar with one, just to sort of emphasize to our listeners, because everyone seems to want to buy a Rolex or an Omega or an IWC or a Patek Philippe. What are we looking at on servicing generally?
Well, I think it depends on who you talk to about servicing. I mean, if you talk to a watchmaker, and I talk to plenty of watchmakers, their general rule of thumb is that you have your watch serviced every 2 or 3 years. The problem with that is, and again, most of my videos come from a financial and a business perspective. Everything that I tend to talk about, Richard, I've got my business hat on rather than my collector's hat or my aficionado's hat. Now, I personally used to get a lot of customers come into my shop and they'd be wearing a Rolex, an Omega, a Breitling, whatever. And they would say, oh, could you service my watch for me and how much will it cost? And I'd say, well, okay, but before we go any further, what's wrong with it? Is there any particular issues? And they'd say, no, it's running fine. I'd say, well, why do you want to spend £300, £400, £500 on something that it may not need it? It's not a car. It's not going to conk out on the middle lane on the M25 motorway. It's not going to cause you any danger. So unless there's an issue with the watch, because ultimately it's a bit like servicing a car. The more money you throw into that watch over the years, if you're throwing £500, £600, £700 at that watch every 2 years, it doesn't take long for that amount of money to build up. And at the end of it, when the time comes to say goodbye to that watch, you're going to be chasing quite a hefty financial outlay. when you look at it over the course of 10, 12 years. So I think in general, if you're owning a fine watch, I think you keep your eye on it. If you start to feel that it's not acting as it should do, if it's not winding properly, if it's not keeping time, if it's not self-winding properly, then yes, get it to your watchmaker, get it to the dealers, the authorised dealers, and let them take a look. Cost-wise, it depends what brand you're looking at. Rolex is actually not too bad, really, considering the luxury brand that you're dealing with. It's a stellar watch brand. Some of the brands you have to be careful with, brands like Audemars Piguet, Hublot, a Lange brands like this, a little bit more specialist, not so many people working on them, and you can end up with a bill of maybe £1,000. Yeah. But Omega, Breitling, Rolex, even Rolex, you'd be unlucky to get a bill that's going to cost you more than, say, 500 quid. But it will depend on what watch, what model, what is wrong with it, what needs doing. It's how long's a piece of string.
And one other sort of final question, a name that I discovered actually only a short time ago concerning watches, and that is a Frankenstein watch. Now, Frankenstein, as I understand, is a watch made up of different parts. I mean, could you perhaps sort of educate us as to what a Frankenstein watch actually is and why we should beware of them?
So Frankenstein, the term really, I think it originates from a lot of watch forums. And if I'm honest with you, Richard, I don't really think a lot of people understand why they're using that term. And it can mean so many things. What's Frankenstein to one person might just be simply modified to someone else. So it's a very loosely and broadly used term. For me, the true definition of a Franken watch, it's a watch made up of parts from other watches and from watches that it shouldn't have been made up from. To some degree, we all know what Frankenstein really was, and that's the true definition of a Frankenstein watch. It's not, for example, if you buy yourself a Rolex Submariner and decide to wear it on a NATO strap, that doesn't become a Frankenstein watch. It becomes a Frankenstein watch when maybe someone's slipped, a cheap movement in it. You've got a genuine Rolex case with a genuine Rolex dial, but a fake movement, or that's when we start to talk about Frankenstein. One of the areas that it arrived from is that in recent years, there's been a fashion of turning antique pocket watches, because the fashion has been to wear a large watch. So people were taking 50, 60 millimeter pocket watches, turning them, putting on lugs, soldering on lugs, gold lugs, steel lugs, silver lugs, and moving the dial around with the internal so that the wind is at 3 instead of at 12, a Franken watch.
Paul, that's tremendous. Before we end this part of the video, are there any sort of final comments you'd like to make or recommendations you'd like to make to someone considering purchasing a premium watch, especially if it's their first one? Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I'm always delighted to offer such help. First of all, take your time. That's number one. Research, take your time, relax, be patient, because the vast majority of mistakes that I see that people make with watches is when the decisions have been made too quickly and they haven't done the right amount of research. So the first tip would be to take your time and show patience. And the second tip, I go back to the beginning of our interview, you're investing in your dealer and the person that you are buying the watch from. And those would be my biggest 2 tips.
Paul, tremendous. Thank you so much. Okay. I'm sure our listeners will have benefited a great deal from your advice. And as mentioned before,
I've lost my voice.
We place a link to your channel in the description box below, and we're going to recommend to all of our listeners to subscribe to your channel, hopefully give you a thumbs up. I certainly hope so, but certainly to comment as well.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the Inner Sanctum in a second, but Paul, thank you so much at this stage.
No problem at all. Thank you.
And there we have it. We certainly hope you found this useful. And tomorrow we shall be publishing in the Inner Sanctum part 2 of this interview, where we discuss in more depth the best watches for investment purposes, those to avoid, and what sort of budgets we have to look at. Paul agreed to answer 8 additional questions But he was so generous with his time, I think we actually extended it to 12 or 13. So if you haven't already visited and subscribed to his channel, we strongly advise you to do so. Paul Thorpe Watch Dealer. And his link is in the description box below. Now, for those of you who are not bronze or silver members of our Inner Sanctum and are keen to listen to this extended interview with Paul, we are offering a 50% discount for those who enroll this month. And this will give you access to a whole range of additional benefits and videos. We have placed, again in the description box below Paul's link, a 50% off code, which when you go to sign up to the Inner Sanctum, it asks you to enter a promotional or discount code. If you enter that, then you will receive 50% off your first month's membership, and that applies to bronze and or silver. Thank you for listening.